Hello everyone and welcome to my tier list video for the January 2023 format. Before I get started, I just want to make some things clear. The goal of this tier list is not to criticize other lists, but to offer a discussion that is more centered around the best of one experience, rather than the best of three tournament scene which tier lists often cater to. This tier list is designed to be focused more on the latter experience that most players, in my opinion, are more likely to relate to. So let's get into a quick definition of what I mean with every tier. Tier 1 is going to include the best deck or the best decks plural of the formats, which are the decks that you should be always prepared to face. Even then, you'll have very few, if any, overwhelming wins against them. Even matchups that are positive are only at best going to be a 60-40 matchups, but these are the decks that you should be prepared to see on ladder the most because they dominate the current metagame. They are, without a doubt, the most powerful decks. Tier 2 includes decks that are also very powerful, but somewhat easier to manage due to more identifiable weaknesses that are going to vary from deck to deck. We'll go over those weaknesses when we discuss those decks, of course. The tier 3 decks are less powerful overall, maybe they're less consistent, maybe they have a lower ceiling, but they might have a little bonus that makes them uniquely suited for some matchup, and they're more than capable of holding out on their own. They're going to have a tougher time climbing the ranks, especially against the tier 1 deck, against which they probably don't have a very good game, but they are still decks that are capable of reaching COG with relative ease. And now for the rogue decks. This category includes pretty much every other deck that you can think of. Metal Foe, Shironuis, Lunalight, Blackwind, Starry Night, etc. I decided to specifically mention these 4 decks being Red Eyes, Dark Magician, Blue Eyes, and Six Samurai because these are, in my opinion, the most popular one and the ones you're most likely to encounter on ladder. These can easily get wins and help you climb from the lower ranks up to plat, maybe legend, but as you keep climbing with them, you realize that people are more than capable of dealing with them because they've been known quantities for a while and the forms of interaction that they propose isn't as powerful as it maybe used to be. Let's get started with the first deck of the tier list, which is obviously going to be Mekk-Knights in tier 1. It is the undisputed best deck of the format. It is able to produce 2 Floodgates, Ibli and Secret, which you are going to have to deal with, and on top of that, it is able to generate a huge board of beaters that also generate advantage of their own, like Blue Sky and Purple Nightfall, provide removal in the form of Yellow Star and Red Moon. They also have access to link options and the rank 8 Galaxy package. It's basically a whole deal with this deck. Its key weaknesses include Dark Hole, MST, and Book of Moon is also decent. The main choke point of this deck, if you're facing it, is Morning Star, which you should try to negate or prevent the summon of. Also, make sure that if you only set 2 cards, you set them in different columns. This usually helps. On to tier 2 with the first deck being Goki. It's more of a tier 1.5 deck in my opinion. It's a really good combo deck that is able to set up Disruption going first with Master Ogre and easily OTK going second with Finishing Move. It is also able to leverage tech like Dark Hole or Expendable Die to their advantage, which is really impressive for a deck that used to have no turn 1 capabilities. Unfortunately, as with any combo deck, it is very susceptible to Disruption. Supprex is usually a key point for the deck's ability to combo off, and if you manage to Book of Moon it or get rid of it, as soon as it hits the field, the deck is usually dead in the water. Salamangreat is still a competent link spam / rank 4 toolbox deck post nerf that wins by looping resources and winning out in the grind game. Shame on me for saying that it was dead and unplayable. It's just not my style, really. Balinks also allows them to use cards like Dark Hole and Needle Sealing on top of having a very consistent base, but its weaknesses include, low attack values across the board, a huge vulnerability to Graveyard 8 as well. Infernoid is a very solid aggro deck, able to access a lot of graveyard hit, which is really important in this metagame, and a bunch of spells or monster negates, with Voidseer also serving as added protection for Dark Hole. However, it is really dependent on getting Vanishment to search Feast and Decatron for Disruption, which means that these 2 cards are the key cards you should be focusing on when trying to disrupt the Noid player, and as a very poor Mekk-Knight matchup, due to the fact that they, basically play no removal outside of monsters very specifically. Last but not least, favorite duel hero I know is a contentious pick and probably closer to 2.5 on the tier list, but it is capable of playing and accessing a bunch of text and generate resources out of thin air with their skill, but it is really dependent on resolving Liquid Soldier, which is at 1 copy. Starting tier 3 with DDD, it is a very explosive beatdown strategy that includes a very powerful rank 8 toolbox, with Xenophon in specific being a huge hurdle for Galaxy, Salamangreats and Infinitoids, but due to the nerfs that occurred in summer of 2022, it is somewhat lacking in consistency. Speaking of decks that were really good in the summer of 2022, Burning Abyss is excellent at grind games due to their resource looping, but they suffer a lot against Graveyard Hate and Book of Moon, both of which are very common. Trains is another OTK deck that has also turn 1 options, but it is really prone to disruption before it gets Xyz summons going on. Code Talkers can set up a good turn 1 that implies at least 1 negate and easily OTK on turn 2, but it is kind of a linear deck. It's not really impressive in terms of attack stats, and it did lose in consistency with Lady Debug being moved to limited 2, which is also pretty easy to disrupt. Phantom Knights, and I'm referring to the Phantom strategy version of the deck, has plenty of recursion and some disruption to make use of, but also has a crucial choke point in Breaksword and suffers a lot against Graveyard 8 and Destruction Protection. Odd Eyes is rather flexible when it comes to accessing its XYZ toolbox and text, but it is really dependent on its scales, it lacks protection, and it is overwhelmingly vulnerable to Book of Moon. Hero, and that's including the clock version, but I should probably have separated them, are both very potent OTK strategies, but the classic hero version can't really overextend as much as they used to due to the huge vulnerability to Dark Hole and a very poor mekk-knights matchup. The clock version remedies this with a free MST, but it too can be disrupted considering, well, you need to be able to activate the Clock Tower field spell, which can get MST'd of its own. Necros can leverage free Vax to get enough time to assemble their pieces and can have pretty explosive turns, but they do suffer against mekk-knights, and its form of interactions aren't too relevant against decks that tend to produce few extra deck monsters and boards of large monsters that are not from the extra deck. Trickstars is Sarad Light. It is able to share some of its strength, but lacks its recursive abilities, which it makes up for with Damage Step. Water Exist is a solid control deck, but Dweller Pass isn't nearly as threatening as it used to be, and it plays very poorly against Dark Hole / Book of Moon. Cosmo is kind of a peculiar deck, with Forerunner being a huge problem for some decks, but a very limited option otherwise. Cosmojo is a strong and unique piece of disruption though, and probably the reason to consider playing the deck at all. Magical Muskets do not have to fear MST, which is really cool for a control deck, and they have very potent interaction, including in the damage step, but they also suffer from low attack monsters and vulnerability to, you guessed it, Book of Moon and Dark Hole. Last but not least for tier 3, Harpies is still consistent and rather threatening on paper, but the reality of it is Cyber / Pass is not as huge a threat as it used to be. As rank 4 engines develop, Harpies are kind of outclassed in that manner, and it is a deck that is really susceptible to disruption unless they draw exactly Swallow's Nest. This being said, the recent leak of Lightning Chidori coming in the next selection MIDI box, I think, could potentially help this deck get a better footing in the current metagame. And now for the rogue decks, this category includes pretty much every other deck that you can think of. You know, Metal Foe, Shironuis, Lunalight, Blackwind, Starry Night, etc. I decided to specifically mention these 4 decks being Red Eyes, Dark Magician, Blue Eyes, and Six Samurai because these are, in my opinion, the most popular one and the ones you're most likely to encounter on ladder. These can easily get wins and help you climb from the lower ranks up to Plat, maybe Legend, but as you keep climbing with them, you realize that people are more than capable of dealing with them because they've been known quantities for a while and the forms of interaction that they propose isn't as powerful as it maybe used to be. And that will be it for the tier list. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I look forward to this tier list evolving with the recently announced scale changes and the newly leaked, what was it called? Selection box, mini box, whatever it's called, that includes some apparently really powerful cards like Dark Arm Dragon, Lightning Chidori, I think Ice Dragon's Prison is also there, which potentially huge, another piece of Graveyard Hate, actually. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't hesitate to let me know what you thought of it. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!